Pretty much, almost any video game that has a story mode involving an antagonist includes some type of final boss fight right before the end of the story. Some are bad, some are good, some are great, and some are one of the best you've ever experienced. There are definitely some that I personally think are the best. 5 to be exact. And those 5 final boss fights are what I'm going to be ranking in this first ranking video of mine. Mad Alliance and everyone watching, how's life going for you? It's Joe, aka Mad Joe FC. Welcome to the video. In this video, I'm going to give you a ranking of my 5 favorite final boss fights that I personally think are the best in video game history. Well, who's ready? Let's get it.
Give me the anti-serum! Otto, I've worked your whole life to help you. Please.
You're fighting the wrong man. Have it your way.
Spider-Man PS4 is the first Spider-Man video game I've ever played, and the final boss fight was all I had hoped for a Spider-Man video game final boss fight to be. The game had a spectacular story, but also a really close and personal relationship between Peter Parker and Dr. Octavius that had been established at the beginning and then throughout the entire story had been developed even further. That made for a really nice build-up to the end of the story and made the final battle between them much more emotional than some other final battles. The level starts with a bruised up Peter walking into the lab recently after his first official encounter with Octavius as Doc Ock. I loved the idea that defeating Octavius was going to need to rely on Peter Parker's brains and not only Spider-Man's bronze. Peter knew he needed to somehow be able to counter Octavius's mechanical arms, and so he made a counter in the form of a new suit. I honestly wasn't expecting him to make another suit throughout the game after the advanced suit, so I was really excited when watching him make the anti-Ock suit, especially with the Spider-Man PS4 theme playing in the background. Then it goes to Octavius and Osborn on the top of Oscorp Industries, where Octavius is trying to get Osborn to confess about the wrong things he's secretly been doing. Even in the face of death though, Osborn doesn't give Octavius one bit of satisfaction and doesn't apologize or admit to anything. He seriously has some huge mangoes for that. Octavius then drops Osborn off of the building and then he's saved by Spider-Man. It was so hype watching Spider-Man run up the side of the building, followed by him using his webs to slingshot himself further. The music, the raindrops on the screen, and the dark, rainy atmosphere had for sure complemented this part nicely. When Peter makes it to Octavius, they have a short exchange of dialogue, and then the final boss fight begins. The gameplay itself in the final battle was definitely a lot of fun, and included 2 different fighting segments. Though it would have been nice if there was a bit more to the combat against Octavius, and if one more segment had been included. It was awesome getting to swing around as Spider-Man and fight Octavius while having to dodge debris that's being thrown at you, but also that was pretty much all the actual fighting there was. You either ran or swung around, waiting for Octavius to throw debris at you so you can catch it to throw back at him and then strike at him to punch him a few times, before you do the same thing 2 or 3 more times before the second segment. Then there was even less actual fighting during the second segment on the side of the Oscorp building, where you're only dodging Octavius's attacks and then striking at him when there is an opening. I think it would have been nice for the whole final battle to have a bit more combat options, and also one more segment maybe could have been included to make the battle a bit longer than it was. Imagine that when Octavius slammed Peter into the window, he actually slams him through the window. Then they start fighting again, and the room they're fighting in starts to catch fire, while debris is falling from the floor above, and floors below them start to collapse. In the midst of all the destruction, Octavius grabs Peter and stabs him. Peter rips out the neural interface, they fall down a few floors, and the rest plays out how it did in the game. The story, though, that the final fight revolved around is what made it one of the best I've ever experienced. Peter ultimately having to fight the man he looked up to, who inspired him, who he wanted to be like, and who was a hero to him. That was really sad. As well as Octavius ultimately deciding to kill the guy who he saw as his son. It's really heartbreaking when Peter found out Doc knew it was him the whole time, because the first time he said,
You knew?
was of shock, but then when the music intensifies and he dramatically says,
You knew?
that was when Peter realized that Octavius isn't only okay with killing Spider-Man, but he's also okay with killing Peter too. I really love the way that Insomniac combined the writing with the gameplay. That is what made up for the lack of combat, and is what made me feel like I was playing a game and also watching a movie at the same time during the final battle. Almost all of the dialogue during the final fight stands out because of the incredible, top-notch voice acting for Peter and Octavius. The voice acting, along with the facial expressions, I was able to feel all of their sad emotions hitting me in my soul. The lighting, camera angles, and cinematography were gorgeous too, especially when they both fell onto the side of the building. The camera zooming down on Octavius as sparks and debris are falling past him, then the camera zooming up at Spider-Man as sparks float around him while explosions are happening behind him. My god, that looked epic. What made the final battle even better was that at the end, the game made me actually feel sorry for Otto, something I wasn't expecting. He really did want to help people with his research, and in a way, change the world by succeeding in his work. But in the end, the interface, along with just his true hatred, consumed him. That ultimately led to Aunt May dying in this continuity because of him. So while a part of me does feel bad for him, another part of me is just fine with him being put away in the raft once the story had concluded. His first few lines to Peter once the battle is over makes it seem like there's maybe a possibility he could be redeemed. But then, while he's begging for help, he makes a desperate attempt at blackmail. He brings up Peter's identity because he thinks he can scare Peter into protecting him from the authorities, something he would have never considered doing prior to his descent into madness. That one line wipes away any hope of him ever returning to the man he used to be. I really did hear and feel the pain in both of them near the end of their conversation once Peter started walking away. It was easily the parts of the final battle that made me the most emotional.
You do what you think is best, Doc. It's all any of us can.
Peter?
Even when it hurts like hell.
Peter, where are you going? Peter? Peter!
Like, god dang. The voice acting was insane, and it was really sad when Otto kept calling Peter's name as he's just laying there helplessly. The relationship between Peter and Octavius in this game was really well written, which, for me, was the main thing that made the Spider-Man PS4 final battle as great as it was, and why for me personally is one of the best final boss fights I've experienced. Super Mario 64 DS's final boss fight is honestly one of the most intimidating and intense final boss fights I've ever experienced. Looking back at it again, 12 plus years later from when I originally first beat it, it honestly doesn't even look that challenging, and I feel like if I was to dust off my old DS and play Mario 64 again, that I would probably be able to beat this final boss fight on my first try. I have very vivid memories of playing the final level for the first time, and though it looks really easy to 20-year-old me, for 8-year-old me, this final boss fight was 2 words: very hard. The first part of the level was an amazing 3D platforming section that was a ton of fun, but also back then was really tough for me to get through. It involved many moving and spinning walkways, various enemies, walkways that acted as balance beams when stepped on, rotating platforms that had to be activated via a button, steep vertical and horizontal walkways, obstacles that blocked your path, and just when you reach the end, there's a lovely wind gust to hold you back and possibly even blow you off of the map if you're caught in the wrong spot. For an 8-year-old Joe, all of those different things I just mentioned was just a bit much for me to handle all in one level, and that's before even getting to the actual boss fight. The intense music, paired with the purple and pink background, a long drop to my certain death if I fall, and then a long series of very careful platforming to do. At the time when I first played it, it was honestly pretty daunting, but still a whole lot of fun. My brother and our 2 best friends were all watching me play the final level, and when I made it to the pipe, I very clearly remember I had completely lost my crap. After many attempts, I had finally gotten to it, and I had yelled at my brother and our 2 friends, telling them to leave the room now because I needed to be alone to concentrate. I was in the end game now. In my mind, I was freaking out and I was scared to enter the pipe. I had waited a few minutes before even going in because I needed to build up the courage to do so. I eventually jumped in and I had entered the final boss fight. As soon as Mario fell into the arena, I was immediately terrified by everything from the intimidating boss music, the downward screen pan from Mario to Bowser, the look and feel of the atmosphere, and even Bowser's taunting laugh and dialogue made the tiny hairs on my arms rise. Back then, Bowser was portrayed as more of a serious and intimidating threat and enemy than in some of the more recent Mario titles. So when Bowser had said everything that had appeared in the text box, as an 8-year-old, I really did feel threatened. Again, I was 8 years old the first time I played the final fight, and I'm sure a lot of you were young kids when you played it as well. So even though it doesn't look too intense, this is definitely what the boss fight felt like the first time I ever played it, and I reckon if I was to play it again now, it would still feel just like this. The actual boss fight doesn't have much to it in terms of fighting Bowser. It was simple, but that doesn't mean it wasn't challenging, especially for younger players. Mario games are generally made with younger players in mind, so the lack of options for combat in the fight isn't an issue for me at all, and like I said, it was still challenging. I remember trying to beat Bowser for the first time and running around trying to grab his tail while he circled and breathed fire at me was a bit rough. Again, it felt like this. In fact, Bowser actually had multiple attacks to be careful of. The attacks consisted of him breathing a line of fire at you, breathing fire up in the air, causing lots of smaller fireballs to fall on the arena, and him quickly charging at you. All you had to do was swing him around by his tail and throw him into the spikes, but because of those multiple attacks, it wasn't always easy. I grew up playing the remake of Super Mario 64 on the Nintendo DS, and I can still remember how sweaty and sore my hands and fingers were from repeatedly going in that circle motion with the D-pad, swinging Bowser around. It required accurate aim and precision when swinging him to successfully throw him into the spikes, and every time you missed, you had to repeat the whole process again until you successfully threw him into the spikes 3 times. Also, when Bowser jumps back onto the arena after a miss when trying to throw him into the spikes, when he lands, a part of the arena cracks off, and it also causes a vibration that can make the player take damage. Then on the 3rd round of the fight, huge pieces of the arena floor automatically crack off and fall. That had greatly decreased the amount of space available to move around, making the fight more intense than it already was. It also meant that you could no longer lure Bowser close to the spikes to make swinging him into them easier. Nintendo basically said, "Oh, you thought you were going to make this easy for yourself? Well, let me do you a favor and make it hard for you." It had took me many attempts, but that same day, I had eventually beat the final boss fight in Super Mario 64 DS, and I remember to this day how accomplished I had felt once it was over. It was so hype reading the dialogue from Bowser being upset about his defeat, hearing the epic music wind down, and then seeing him disintegrate into a huge power star. I swear, getting the power star and seeing Mario triple jump into the air, gracefully fly off the arena with the wing cap, as the camera zoomed way out and then back at him, along with the grand finale music, was so hype the first time seeing it, and I still get a smile on my face seeing it even now. The Super Mario 64 DS final boss fight had a wonderful 3D platforming section, as well as the final fight with Bowser, and both parts definitely proved to be quite a challenge for me when I was a young Joe. It was intense and difficult, but it was also a lot of fun and brings back awesome memories. The challenge it gave me, the fun I had playing it, and the nostalgia I get from seeing it many years later is what makes this final boss fight easily one of the best I've ever experienced, and why I personally think is one of the best in video game history.
Tell Rock we're coming for him.
Why don't you just tell me yourself?
You're done, Rourke. Let's finish this.
Looks like Icarus got control of the rod. All that's left is Rourke. Let's go.
Call of Duty Ghost is personally my favorite in the franchise, for many reasons, and the final boss fight is definitely one of the most thrilling boss fights I have ever played. The game had an amazing story, but also a personal relationship between one of the main protagonists, Elias, and the main antagonist, Rourke, that had been established in a flashback mission a bit early in the game. They were both soldiers in an elite team called Ghost, but then in the flashback mission, Elias wasn't able to save Rourke, and when he fell, the Federation army had found him and brainwashed him into being a ghost killer. Then later on in the game, Rourke shoots Elias, killing him, which makes the stakes much more personal for the two main protagonists, Hesh and Logan, both sons of Elias. Now the brothers have a vendetta against Rourke, and their mission becomes more than just defeating the Federation. It's now also about getting vengeance on Rourke by killing him, for him killing their father. And it's that narrative that made the build-up to the climax very fascinating. It made the final fight between them much more personal compared to other final fights in military story games. The level starts with everything coming to a head, as Hesh and Logan are taking out soldiers on a Federation supply train that Rourke is on board. The gameplay itself is definitely nothing too challenging, but was a lot of action-packed fun from beginning to end. It was really exciting making my way to Rourke, having to run and jump in a small linear path from each car on the train, while also shooting down waves of Federation soldiers trying to stop me from getting to the front car. There is also sway from the moving train, and then more gunfire being shot at you as well from the side, by enemy helos that come in midway through, making you have to use small parts of the train's roof as cover. All of the action and movement involved, along with knowing the stakes of stopping the Federation and Rourke, really had my adrenaline going the first time playing the level, and made it all the more fun pushing up to the front car. When they made it to the front car and pinned in Rourke, I loved just how dead set and determined Hesh was to get vengeance on him and put him down for good, telling their ally Merrick, who is now in control of the Odin weapon system regained from the Federation, to fire on their position if given the word, showed that he had absolutely no problem with himself dying, as long as Rourke dies for killing their father. The actual boss fight itself doesn't really involve much fighting, but more so just mainly serves to finish the story being told in a sudden dramatic way. That doesn't mean there wasn't any fighting though, and when Logan opens the door comes my favorite part of the whole level. I loved how everything was so frenetic in this scene, as first, two Federation soldiers charge at them and then one shoots a rocket launcher in this small and tight space, hitting one of the engines. I had so much fun watching and playing this part, as the train stops and Logan slides through the car into the next one, and so quickly, literally comes face to face with Rourke. Everything was so fast and intense, and then it comes with an awesome slow motion moment where you grab Rourke's hand and use his gun to shoot the last 3 soldiers with him. The story had culminated to the main protagonist against the main antagonist, all in the same room. Rourke shoots Hesh, and Hesh instantly says, "Checkmate," giving Merrick the word to fire an Odin rod right on them. Even though the brothers didn't die, and not even Rourke for that matter. What I loved about this very moment was that as soon as Hesh saw the outcome, he didn't even hesitate to give Merrick the word. He told Merrick, "If you hear the word, then to fire on their position, not when you hear the word," meaning that they were planning on killing Rourke themselves, and checkmate was only going to be a last resort if all else failed. Hesh saw the end result, and as long as he avenged his father's death, he was going to be satisfied, no matter how it happened. And so he said the word, "Checkmate," giving Merrick the all clear to fire an Odin rod on them, thinking for sure it's going to kill Rourke, and being okay with it killing them as well. I loved that moment. It was so hype for me when playing this part for the first time. Seeing that they had all survived and realizing that the brothers were going to have to kill Rourke themselves after all. Every bit of this part was hype for me. Seeing Rourke going for the gun to kill Logan, Hesh stopping him only to get body slammed and have a knife at his neck, then Hesh throwing some bullets he has to Logan, and Logan catching one of them. That moment was awesome. The way things played out, there was only one way Rourke was going down, but I really didn't want to have to also shoot Hesh. That's why I hesitated, and I did for a bit too long, and then had to restart the scene. Everything that followed after firing the gun, all the way to the end of the main story, was just amazing. Logan first had to swim through the main car to get out, and then still had to swim through the fallen debris to get to land, all while carrying his brother. It was looking bleak with Logan's heartbeat quickly accelerating and his vision dimming, so I was uncertain if they were going to make it out, and was so happy when they did. I thought it was a cool little detail how there was basically a playable cutscene at the end. When I saw Logan drop Hesh on the ground, I was expecting to just watch him drag them both forward, but then the words "press and hold L2 and R2" appeared on screen, and I was like, oh cool, I actually get to play this part. This whole final moment felt so epic the first time I played it, and still feels epic even now, watching it again. The grand music playing as I controlled Logan dragging Hesh to shore, Hesh telling his brother, and indirectly the player, that he's proud of him, both of them sitting together, watching Odin blast the Federation to Kingdom Come. All of it was amazing, and had made me feel a great sense of achievement. I really love the ending, and how it's more of a straightforward ending that isn't seen as much as a majority of other endings in different forms of media that take more time to wrap up the story. In Call of Duty Ghost, the main protagonist come face to face with the main antagonist, defeat him, quote unquote. They have a brief moment celebrating their victory, and the story ends. I definitely do enjoy endings in media that have a few scenes after the final climax to tie up major plot points. I just also like the more straightforward ending in Call of Duty Ghost, and I think it works very well. The sudden ending after the quote-unquote victory, and the brothers celebrating while watching the Federation retreat, and Odin finishing them off, was definitely satisfying. And that was the ending of the final boss fight for Call of Duty Ghost. Or so I had thought. Infinity Ward had basically said, "Oh, you had thought that the story ended." Well, actually it did. Except it didn't. A brief scene happens after the mid-credits, which is a direct continuation of the main ending. My first time playing this part, I was thinking, wow, this is neat. when seeing Hesh and Logan just relaxing and catching their breath, and I liked the small addition of being able to still move my head around. I heard what sounded like footsteps to the right, but I definitely was not expecting for a person to appear. So when I turned and saw Rourke come out of nowhere and kick me in the face, I remember having the crap scared out of me and uttering, "Oh God!" Then, "What?" Followed by, "Yo," as he broke Logan's arm and kicked Hesh in the face too. I was in complete shock and disbelief when I saw Rourke still alive, standing and fighting after getting beat up, shot in the chest by a revolver, and partially drowning. It was an intense, but also a really cool moment, hearing Rourke tell Logan that the two of them are going to destroy the remaining ghosts, and being able to still move Logan's head around as him and Hesh are trying to reach for each other as Rourke drags him away was also nice. That whole end scene had got me so hyped and left me eagerly wanting Infinity Ward to make a sequel so I could see the rest of the story. And so, Infinity Ward's next Call of Duty title was not Ghost 2. I included the end scene of the game in this ranking video of final boss fights because as soon as Logan shoots Rourke and the fight quote-unquote ends, the main story ends a minute after that, and then the end scene with Rourke attacking Logan and Logan trying to stab him takes place right after the story's main ending. The main protagonist and main antagonist are still fighting in that scene, so personally I feel it's also part of the final fight. In my opinion, the final fight and ending in Call of Duty Ghost was phenomenal. It had a great twist that I wasn't expecting. The antagonists in the form of the Federation were defeated and the war was won, but the personal antagonist Rourke surprisingly survived, and it could be said that he won in the very end. Rourke looked so superior and dominant compared to the brothers. He survived the kinetic rod, getting shot by a magnum, and I was so shocked when he was still alive and kidnapped Logan. Usually the good guys always come out on top in different forms of media, so it was shocking, but also cool to see the bad guy win in a way for a change. The actual fighting throughout the whole final fight was already thrilling and action-packed, and the personal stakes and vendetta created between the brothers and Rourke was what made this final boss fight much more fun, interesting, and satisfying to play, and for me personally, it's definitely one of the best I've ever experienced. New Super Mario Bros. Wii's final boss fight. Holy frick. The final fight in this game is without a doubt one of, if not the most intense, heart-pounding, scary, and intimidating final boss fights I have ever played. It was also a whole lot of fun though, and was definitely a tough challenge when I first played it when I was 9. Like the Mario 64 final fight, the Mario Bros. Wii final fight is another one that doesn't really look much challenging at all, seeing it again 10 years from when I originally first beat it. I already know that if I was to find and dust off my old Wii, I would easily be able to solo beat this final boss fight on my first try, as I already have done many times before. This is another final fight I have very vivid memories of playing for the first time with my younger brother. And even though it looks easy for 20-year-old me and 17-year-old brother, for 9-year-old me and 7-year-old brother, this final fight was, again, very hard. The first part of the level was an okay lava castle themed regular 2D platforming stage that actually wasn't very hard at all, and honestly, felt very easy and basic. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. I just felt it was lacking in terms of most factors that go into a Super Mario Bros. Level, especially for the final level in the game. The section before entering the first pipe consisted of some in-air brick platforms, in-air skull platforms that fall when stepped on-ground stone brick areas where you have to either run or jump while avoiding rotating lines of fire, fireball enemies that shoot up from the lava, and, well, that's it. It may sound like a lot, but when all those things are actually put together in a level, is not much. This first section is really easy, for probably even the youngest of players to breeze through, and there's no real obstacle or threat that gets in your way or stops you from moving forward. That makes this part of the level not nearly as entertaining as it could have been. The fireball enemies and rotating lines of fire are both really easy to dodge and are the only obstacle and threat in the stage. Also, all of the platforming areas are able to easily be sped through, again, due to the lack of obstacles and threats. There is literally only one other power-up available on this stage other than the red mushroom, which is the ice flower, and it's not even needed. Yeah, you can throw ice balls at the fireballs, but you can also just simply jump over them or wait for them to fall back into the lava. I think the platforming for this first section was fine, but I think it could have been better and more of a challenge to move through if more obstacles and enemies were added, which would also make the ice flower a bit more useful. 1 or 2 more power-ups could have been added as well to counter the more obstacles and enemies that would be in this improved version of the first section. I know that Mario games are generally made with younger players in mind, so I understand Nintendo making the levels easy enough for younger players to successfully play through. I understand that, and it wouldn't be an issue for me if only the few ideas I mentioned were added in the level as well, so that it would be more of a challenge for older players too. Many of the other levels in the many other Super Mario Bros. Games have been way more entertaining and challenging than the first section in the final level in this game was. For the final stage in a level of a Super Mario Bros. Game, I want it to be filled with different obstacles, enemies, power-ups, and platforming areas so that playing through it is as fun as can be, while making my way to the final boss. The first section of this part of the level was okay, but I also think it was a bit too standard, bland, basic, and easy for a final level in a game. The second section of this platforming stage was actually a bit better than the first part. It involved the skull platforms and rotating fireballs from before, but also included lava slowly falling below you and like 1 or 2 dry bone enemies that really were more of something to distract you than they were a threat. Since the skull platforms fall when stepped on, it gave me a sense of urgency in being quick but careful about when to jump off of one platform and onto another one, with the lava right below you that will instantly kill you if you fall in it. The first time I played this part was 2-player with my brother, so we really had to be careful how we played through it. 2 players jumping on different platforms at once, causing pretty much all of them to fall at once, was for sure making it more tough, and we died a few times on this part. We then put our heads together, used teamwork, and stepped on and jumped on the same platforms at the same time to make it to the bottom. Overall, the regular 2D platforming stage for this level was fine, but the second part of it is where it shines and gets players on their toes for the final fight to come. When we got through the pipe and saw the boss door, we started freaking out and had to mentally prepare ourselves before we opened it. I remember thinking to myself,
"This is it. Don't get scared now."
We opened the door and entered the final boss fight. We confronted Bowser and were both surprised to see that the boss fight wasn't anything crazy at all and was almost the exact same setup as the final boss fight in New Super Mario Bros. DS. After about a minute of blocking Bowser's fire attacks with ice balls, we made our way around him and hit the button to break the ground below him. We did it. We had beat New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and the actual boss fight with Bowser was ridiculously easy. The end music started playing, and even though the fight was short, we were happy that we had beat the game, but had also wished there was more to the fight. And then, one of the biggest plot twists in my childhood happened. Who we thought was Peach turned around, and when we saw it was actually the freaking wizard guy, Kamik, we were like, "Ew, what? That's not Peach." When this game was released, it was during a time when Bowser fake-out deaths were not as much of an occurrence as it has now become in Mario games. So, me and my brother were just innocent kids and were not at all expecting what happened next. We were both confused about why our Wii remotes were vibrating, and then we absolutely had the crap scared out of us when giant Bowser appeared. Like I said earlier in the video, back then, Bowser was portrayed as a more serious and intimidating threat and enemy. So when we saw a gigantic Bowser pop up out of nowhere, roar as loud as frick, causing us to be pushed back against the wall, and then instantly start shooting multiple fireballs at us, we were more than just scared. We were terrified. Then, we started the actual final boss fight. Now, I am able to easily solo beat this boss fight, but back then, it was not easy at all. Not only was it hard, it was also very scary, intense, chilling, and adrenaline pumping. I could be wrong, but I think New Super Mario Bros. Wii was the first time Bowser actually tried to kill Mario. In most of the other previous games, he did fight Mario, but was mainly just trying to stop him from getting Princess Peach back. In this game though, he sets Peach off to the side, and makes his main goal to kill Mario at all costs. Also, it might have been the first time Mario couldn't fight Bowser and had to run away. He was too big, and you were forced to escape for your life until either you were saved by something, or you face an inevitable death by getting fireballed, swatted, or falling in lava. Even though there was literally no actual fighting, this was still, without a doubt, a challenging, epic final boss fight, and it was really well done. It was something very different from many other final battles in Mario games, a glorified and amazing chase and run sequence that had me on the edge of my seat from beginning to end. When me and my brother played this part for the first time, we were pretty much just screaming and panicking while bumping into each other, trying to dodge fireballs and get away from Bowser. We didn't beat it on our first try, but replaying it over and over was so much fun. All you had to do was run away from him and dodge his fire attacks, but everything else added to that is what made something as simple as this so enjoyable. You had to be smart about where you jumped so that Bowser would shoot fire and break certain parts of the walls so you could advance faster. I remember this battle had my heart rate over 150 beats per minute when he started long jumping at me, and the progression of the intense music nearly gave me a heart attack. The part when you had to jump on the moving down platform is when I really started freaking out, because it was there when it got more intense. Waiting for the platform to get me to the next piece of ground, and then Bowser jumping right in front of me had me shook. That intimidating roar in the distance, accompanied by the choir, had sent chills down my spine. The change in the music here had really got me charged up and made me think, we're in the final stretch, just keep going. When I had hit the item box and saw a propeller mushroom come out, I was so relieved. Me and my brother were trapped in hell, trying to escape, and that propeller mushroom was our savior to make the last stretch of this chase not nearly as tough as it would have been without it. What followed after that had increased my anxiety levels ×3. The second half of the chase became more difficult because now you had to quickly jump from one platform to the next, all of them moving in different directions, while also avoiding the rising tides of lava coming from Bowser's landings after he jumps. On top of that, there are more walls blocking your path that you have to jump over or crouch under. When playing this final battle over and over trying to beat it, I had really felt the pressure on me during this part, knowing I'm getting closer and closer to the end, and that just one mistake can be fatal. I know for older players this battle is an easy cakewalk, but for a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, everything combined in this battle had made it really challenging, and we have failed it many times. I remember there were times when we had got so close to the end, we could literally see the button in the distance, but would still die before making it. It had took me and my brother many attempts, but that same day, we had eventually beat the final boss fight in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and it was crazy how it went down. We had made it to the halfway point where the propeller mushroom is, and that's when I had met my unfortunate demise. My brother, who was now all alone and panicking, had kept moving on, until he got too scared about the possibility of dying and us failing again that he gave me the controller. The burden to finish this final battle solo dolo was now literally in my hands, and I was going to see it be that I made it to the end. I felt an immense amount of pressure, fear, intensity, adrenaline, heart pounding, and chills inside of me as I rushed, losing my power-ups, making my way to the button. Then I eventually saw it, got to it, jumped on it, and we were so hyped when watching Bowser sink in the lava and then hearing the grand music at the end. We knew that we had finally beat the final boss fight for real, and the challenge that came before it is what made the victory feel so rewarding. I count this chase scene as a final boss fight because even though there was pretty much no actual fighting between Mario and Bowser, Bowser was attacking Mario in multiple ways. Then at the end, Mario indirectly attacked Bowser by pressing the button, causing him to drown while debris falls on his head. Therefore, there was somewhat a final fight. Overall, the new Super Mario Bros. Wii final boss fight in its entirety was freaking epic and nothing less. It had a lackluster regular 2D platforming stage, but the scary and unexpected twist in the hype chase sequence are what made it as incredible and memorable as it was. Having a chase sequence as the final battle was something unique and original compared to other final battles in Mario games, and the way it was designed and how well it worked is what really makes it stand out. All of the different factors combined into the chase sequence made it an absolute challenge for me when I was younger, and other elements added to it made the challenge even more of a mental one. Seeing a giant Bowser obliterating everything in his path while roaring and chasing me was terrifying and really made him feel like a threat. The music from the orchestra had instilled fear in me and is some of the best final boss music I've ever heard. Having to quickly jump from platform to platform while also avoiding different obstacles during the second half of the chase had really made me feel anxiety and pressure. And finally pressing the button, seeing Bowser fall, and hearing the victory music was so satisfying. The nostalgia hits me hard when watching this final battle again many years later, and I have very great memories of this game, making me remember my childhood and me and my brother sitting on the floor, desperately trying to beat the level. This is for sure one of the most epic, intense, heart-pounding, chilling, and fun final boss fights I have ever experienced, and I absolutely personally think is one of the best in video game history.
Everyone obsessed with his treasure gets what they deserve.
So what, you're just leaving us here to die?
Oh, I'm just leaving. Whether you die or not, I don't really care.
Nadine, wait.
So long, Rafe.
Nadine! Nadine! You open this goddamn door right now!
Rafe, she's gone! Come on, give me a hand, we'll all get out of here.
No, that won't work.
Come on, help me with Sam and I'll help you open the door.
No, I'm not going to be able to enjoy one of these coins, knowing that you and your worthless brother are still sucking air.
Just calm down. You can practice your fencing when we get outside.
Nate, just shut up.
Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is easily my favorite in the franchise, and the final fight is absolutely my favorite final boss fight ever in video game history. The game had a phenomenal story, but also a really close relationship between Nathan Drake and Samuel Drake, who was revealed to be Nathan's older brother with the announcement of Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 was our first time seeing Sam, and so because of that, Naughty Dog established the brothers' relationship literally from the very beginning of the game, and throughout the entire story developed it even further. Not only did Nathan have a relationship with Sam, but both of the brothers also had a previous relationship with the main antagonist of the game, Rafe Adler. He used to be a business partner of theirs when hunting treasure, which was shown in a flashbacks chapter very early in the game. In the flashbacks chapter, they were looking for Captain Henry Avery's treasure and were posing as inmates in a prison where an artifact was located, with the help of Rafe paying one of the guards to get them inside. The artifact ended up being a fake, and when the job went south and resulted in them having to escape, Sam got caught in the crossfire and Nate wasn't able to save him. Sam supposedly died, which had left Nathan distraught, and Rafe was frustrated about not finding the treasure. Both of them had pretty much had enough of each other. Nate ended up bailing on Rafe, and Rafe continued his search for the treasure, partnering up with the game's other main antagonist Nadine, who leads a mercenary group called Shoreline. Sam survived though, and years later, Rafe finds out and wants his help finding the treasure. And so, Rafe bribes the prison warden to let Sam out. Sam finds his brother once he has located the real artifact, tells him the false situation he's in, and asks for his help to find the treasure. The relationships and all the story threads between Nathan, Sam, and Rafe is what made the build-up to the end of the story as incredible as it was, and Rafe being a villain that Nate has had history with in the past made the final fight between them a personal one compared to all of the other final boss fights in the previous Uncharted games. The level starts with Nate making it to the bottom of a cave where Captain Avery's ship is sitting while on pursuit of Sam. At first, the brothers were escaping, letting Rafe find the treasure himself, but when they get divided, Sam decides he wants to see this hunt through and heads towards the cave. There isn't much to the gameplay in the first part, as it's just you swimming to the ship, but the front side of it explodes because Avery had rigged the ship and the entire cave. The beginning of the final level already made me have an uneasy feeling, knowing that Sam and Rafe are together on the ship. So when the side of the ship blows off, it became intense because you start to worry if the worst has just happened to Sam. The game did a good job at making players care about Sam throughout the story, which added to the fear you got when the side of the ship blew off. Nate climbs in the hole, onto the ship, and into the lower floor of it, where the treasure is revealed to indeed be there. I like the way Nathan's character progression shows here when he sees the treasure. He found the treasure, and this time he isn't concerned about it in the slightest. He's only concerned about finding his brother. He even says, "There's your treasure. Was it worth it?" Which is actually similar to what he said in a 30-second trailer for the game, so I really did appreciate that small line. It's awesome when you open the hatch to the pirate's cabin and see Rafe come out from the smoke, knowing everything has come to a head. Sam is shown passed out on the ground, stuck under a wood beam, and I love how Nate's character progression shows again here, more heavily. He doesn't care about the treasure. He tells Rafe he can have it and to just let him and his brother walk away. Nadine comes in as well, and then turns on Rafe for him almost double-crossing her earlier and paying her mercenaries more to threaten her to get on board a booby-trapped ship. You can see the level of detail in Rafe's face when he realizes Nadine is serious about giving her his gun, which just shows the effort put in from the motion capture of the voice actor and the editors. I like how this scene showed Nadine was an antagonist smart enough to know when she's crossing the line. She decided to leave with the millions in gold she already collected and not get killed over being greedy for the rest of the treasure. She enlightens Rafe and Nate that the two skeletons with swords impaled in them are Avery and Two, and that everyone obsessed with the treasure ends up dead. She then leaves and shuts the hatch, leaving Nate and Rafe to deal with their fate. When playing for the first time, I had no idea what to expect next. Nate and Rafe were both trapped and without their guns, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I like that after everything that has happened with him, Sam, and Rafe, Nate wasn't thinking about doing anything to Rafe, and even said the three of them can all still get out together. I remember saying, "Oh God," when Rafe pulled the sword from the skeleton, and the instant fear me and Nate had, realizing that Rafe was really going to kill him. My fear was then subsided for just a few seconds by laughter when they made this exchange.
Hey, just calm down. You can practice your fencing when we get outside.
Nate, just shut up.
I think the banter in Uncharted 4 might have been the best in the series. Then, the final boss fight started. The gameplay itself in the final fight didn't involve doing too much, but it was still very fun, challenging, intense, and adrenaline pumping. For the first 1 to 2 minutes, you're simply just avoiding Rafe's sword attacks by pressing the triangle and O buttons. Then later, when Nate grabs the other sword, you're still doing the same thing, while also attacking Rafe with your sword and punching or kicking him by pressing the square button. Even now though, as Rafe is mercilessly trying to kill Nate, Nate is still trying to reason with him and avoid fighting, which is what makes this moment so good. He just wants to de-escalate the situation and save his brother. While attacking him, Rafe mentions all of Nate's achievements from the previous Uncharted games, basically saying and showing that he hates this guy and is jealous of all his accomplishments. Rafe pins Nate to the ground, and I like the line he says here.
I have sacrificed everything to find Avery, and I'm not gonna let a couple of two-bit thieves, a senile con man, and a washed-up journalist take that away from me!
He almost sounds like a child who wants something to go his way, and you can really feel his desperation. Nate shoves him off, pulls the sword from the other skeleton, and then the duel to the death begins. A fight with Rafe was pretty much inevitable at this point, but then Rafe said he was going to make sure Sam, Sully, and Elena join him, which I'm pretty sure had sealed the deal. Rafe threatened to kill Nate's brother, his best friend, who's also basically his father at this point, and his wife, who is more valuable to him than all of the treasures combined from every Uncharted game. Being attacked with the sword and having his closest friends threatened is something Nate had to stand his ground to, and at the end of the day, he's a good man who values the right things, despite his problem with him getting into bad situations, such as this one. One of the things I loved about Rafe in this fight is how funny and quick he was with his wit, like Nate. He can't be knocked down, like when he says, "Come on, quit prolonging the inevitable. My arm's getting tired." And he's just as quick when Nate says, "On guard, dickhead," without skipping a beat, responds with, "That's the spirit." This final fight is so phenomenal. It was so awesome when you make that first strike at Rafe with your sword, and then the fight commences. I loved how an amped up version of Nate's theme started playing as well. It added to the epicness of this fight. This is where the intensity increased and when my adrenaline went up. It was awesome. This is a true boss fight. It was so beautifully animated and very well orchestrated. One of the things I love so much about this fight is the sword gameplay. The way you attack, the way the characters swing their swords, and the different ways the characters move, looks and feels so good and smooth. Rafe pins Nate to the ground again. Nate shoves him, slightly slices his stomach, and is here where it's made clear that the man was gone.
Come on, legend.
You can literally see it right in his face at that moment that he had lost his sanity. All that was left of Rafe was a madman, full of greed and envy. You continue fighting, and I love how the change in music, more of the ship's interior collapsing around them, and Rafe's anger blowing through the roof makes it even more intense. This time Nate pins Rafe against the wall and doesn't try to kill him, like how Rafe tried to kill Nate every time he got pinned down. He shows mercy and tells him he and his brother are leaving, and that if he wants to stay with the treasure in the burning ship, then to go ahead. In fact, Nathan didn't try to kill Rafe one time at all during this fight, and he had multiple chances to if he really wanted to. He could have simply shot Rafe with his gun while they were talking after he walked into the pirate's cabin. Every time he had an opening to stab Rafe during the sword fighting, he just either punches or kicks him. When Nate shoves Rafe off of him after getting pinned down the second time, he has a wide open shot to immediately stab Rafe, but instead just slightly slices his stomach. That's another thing I loved about this fight. The whole time Nathan was never trying to kill Rafe. The fact that throughout this entire fight Nate showed mercy and tried to reason with Rafe when Rafe was literally doing the exact opposite shows just how great a character Nate is. Rafe then shoves Nate off of him, slices his stomach, knocks his sword out of his hand, and kicks him to the ground. What Rafe says next to Nate about him having delusions of grandeur kinda makes me laugh after thinking about it because he's basically talking about himself. Rafe was about to give the killing blow, but then Sam comes in clutch and slides Nate's sword back to him just in time. The part that comes next is so amazing. The fight gets even more intense with Nate on the ground fighting off Rafe, the change in music once again, and the lines that Rafe says to Nate.
That's good. Don't hand it to me. I had everything handed to me on a goddamn silver platter.
It's that line that tells us Rafe's entire motivation for hunting Avery's treasure. Also, before I continue, I just want to point out another amazing detail during this part I noticed after watching it a few times. When Nate is squeezing the blade of his sword, blood starts running down in between his fingers where it's cutting into his skin. Continuing about Rafe's dialogue here, he was born rich through inheritance and always had everything given to him. Everyone who knows him knew that, and he didn't want to be known as some spoiled rich boy whose parents gave everything to him. He wanted to find the treasure and wanted to accomplish something on his own for once, without it being handed to him on a silver platter. He didn't even need the treasure because of his wealth, but in a way, he would have actually earned his own wealth by finding the treasure. He wanted this one win and achievement in life so bad that he would have worked for on his own, but then the Drake brothers pretty much take away all his glory. Rafe's been working for 15 years to find Avery, and then the Drake brothers find him in a fraction of the time, and did most of the brain work. So because of that, at the very end, Rafe's goal of having the treasure is subsided until he kills the brothers. He would be killing the two people who took away his feeling of achievement, while also claiming the treasure for himself in the process. Even though he had the treasure, he wasn't going to be satisfied until that was done, and his dialogue right before the final fight starts says it all. It's all of that made Rafe such a great antagonist. Yeah, he was a heartless, egotistic psychopath, but his goal was sympathetic and his motivations seemed reasonable. It felt like he genuinely had a purpose to be in the story, also looking for the same treasure the Drake brothers were looking for. He wasn't a generic, I want to rule the world type of villain. He was just a guy wanting to make a name for himself and to have worked for something in his life. That is what made this Uncharted final fight a personal one, and is one of the reasons this fight is so engaging to me. I love the way that Naughty Dog combined the writing with the gameplay, making it feel like I was also watching a movie at the same time. Their conversation gave more depth to the fight, and the outstanding, top-notch voice acting for Nathan and Rafe really made all of the dialogue stand out. Then came one of the most ironic, karmic, and metaphorical deaths I have seen in a video game.
I earned this. All of it.
You want the treasure, Rafe? It's all yours. Holy shit.
When Rafe thought he had won, he had let his guard down, and it was his smugness, arrogance, and his tendency of dragging out conversations longer than needed that was his downfall. I really liked the final words Nate said to Rafe before killing him too, telling him, "Hey, you've been wanting this treasure? Well here, have it." Rafe has spent over a decade searching for Avery's treasure, and in the very end, he gets crushed and killed by the very thing he wanted. So, Rafe did end up getting the treasure. Or did it get him? I think Rafe may have taken playing the game on crushing mode a bit too literally. I loved that and felt it was a very poetic and fitting end for his character. Nate then tries to save his brother, and what I love about this scene is how it resembles Nate trying to save Sam before at the prison. That time, Nate wasn't able to save Sam and had left him there, thinking he was dead. He just wasn't going to do that again, especially knowing this time that he's still alive. It also shows here how good of an older brother Sam is when he basically says, "Hey, you forget about me, okay? I just need to know you made it out alive." All he wanted to do was find Avery's treasure with Nate, and now that he had done that, he was okay with his fate and just wanted his older brother to get out alive while he could. Nate isn't leaving without his brother though, and thinks of a way to get the wood beam off of him. They made it out of the burning ship, but now they have to make it out of the collapsing cave while the ship is also exploding. This part was insanely good. Holy frick. The somber music as they're swimming toward the light, parts of the ship falling around them, the rocks falling down at the cave's entrance, and the brothers telling each other, "Don't stop!" all had made the moment feel so intense. I know Nate always finds a way out of any situation, but playing this part for the first time really made me worried, as to if Nate was going to make it this time. The sword fighting was quite the challenge and had took me multiple attempts, but that same day I had beat the final boss fight, swam to the light in the cave, and was just as relieved as Elena was when I saw Nate and Sam out of the cave and swimming to land.
Holy shit. Oh, Nate. Nate! Hey! Come on, I got you. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. Hey, Sully, I got him.
Where are you?
Right here.
The final boss fight in Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, was absolutely top tier. In all of the previous Uncharted games, the treasure had some type of supernatural elements to it, and in the final fight, Nathan would fight against a villain who wanted the treasure as well as the supernatural elements to it to either manipulate their enemies or take over the world. Avery's treasure and Rafe were different though. Avery's treasure had no supernatural element to it, and Rafe didn't want the treasure so he could gain any type of mystical or financial power. He just wanted to accomplish something on his own to prove to himself and others that he doesn't need things handed to him by his parents. You could tell though that Rafe's obsession of finding the treasure had made him lose his mind, and when the Drake brothers got in his way and found the treasure in an incredibly short time span, that had made him completely lose his sanity and he became hell-bent on killing them. The brothers directly conflicted with Rafe's goal of self-achievement, and so by killing them, he would take all credit for finding Avery's treasure. That story that the final fight revolved around is what made it so much more interesting to play than it already was. I like how the history of Captain Avery was implemented and changed in the game that resulted in the entire final fight between Nate and Rafe being a poetic and metaphorical throwback to Avery and 2. Avery and 2 killed each other over the treasure, and history repeated itself. Nate and Rafe were looking for the treasure, and it ended with them fighting with the same swords on the same ship. The lighting and camera angles were fantastic too, giving the fight a more cinematic feel. All of the final fights in previous Uncharted games were a huge and crazy action set piece, and the final fight in Uncharted 4 was a lot simpler and smaller, but was just as fun, action-packed, challenging, intense, adrenaline pumping, and epic. I love how it was just two thieves, sword fighting, in a burning pirate ship filled with treasure. It was so cool. And so, with that, the final fight in Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, is the best final boss fight I have ever experienced, and I personally think it is the best final boss fight in video game history. This was a ranking of my 5 favorite final boss fights that I personally think are the best in video game history. I hope you enjoyed and have a marvelous day. That's the video. Mad out.